Hey everyone, welcome to Module 2. In this lesson, we're going to talk about water bathing and pressure canning tomatoes. Although this whole module is jam-packed full of a lot of awesome things, videos, demonstrations, and downloadable PDFs, I want to take a minute to go over a few things with you because there's a lot of information out there that could be a little confusing. Whether you're water bathing or pressure canning tomatoes, it makes no difference. There's no right or wrong way. Both of these processing methods are advantageous to us when we want to put tomatoes in a jar. Whether we're doing diced tomatoes, whole tomatoes, or using tomatoes in a recipe, for instance, like basil diced tomatoes. Whether we water bath or pressure can, they're both suitable to keeping tomatoes long term. Now, I will often gravitate towards aroma tomatoes. So in my recipes, you're going to see me talking a lot about Romas. And the reason I use Romas is because I don't take the time to blanch and peel them because the skin is already so thin. It's not noticeable when you're using them in canning recipes, and the heat has no problem penetrating. But blanching and peeling is a personal preference. So if you want to take the time to blanch all of your tomatoes prior to using them in canning recipes, within this module, I show you the steps to do so. Now, for those of you who don't typically gravitate towards aroma tomato, no worries. Canning tomatoes, also known as beefsteak or heirloom tomatoes, they're all wonderful for home canning. The difference is, however, they have more liquidity, less pulpy flesh, whereas a Roma tomato is going to have less liquid and more pulp. That is why you'll see a lot of recipes calling for plum or Roma tomatoes because they make excellent sauce. You don't have to spend as much time boiling it down. If you use these guys, you're going to have a lot of water content, so that is why it takes longer. Now, any of these will work. There are hundreds of varieties of tomatoes out there. Whether you grow them yourself, whether you head over to your local grocer, farm stand. I myself, I have to use the farmers. I really do. Even though I used to have a 40-foot by 40-foot garden, I don't have that anymore and I just use containers. I don't get as much of a yield. I really put up about 8 bushels of tomatoes a year because our tomatoes are the foundation for a lot of amazing recipes. So whether you're dicing them, preserving them whole, using them in other recipes, just know that you're going to have less liquid and more flesh, more liquid, less flesh, depending on the tomato variety. Now, you'll see in recipes where canning tomatoes are highlighted, that doesn't mean you can't use aroma. Okay, you're still going to want to accomplish the same amount of yield. So if your recipe calls for 2 cups of diced tomatoes, it doesn't matter which one you're using. It could even be your own homegrown or grandma's heirloom, something your neighbor gave to you. There's nothing wrong with changing it up. There's also nothing wrong with using commercially processed tomatoes. I'll give you the conversions later in this module. You'll see it as a downloadable PDF. So if you're working on a canning recipe that involves tomatoes, you happen to run out, you don't have enough fresh, you can use commercially store-bought tomatoes and add that to your canning recipe. As far as water bathing and pressure canning goes, these two methods are interchangeable. What we have to do is compensate for the amount of temperature that they output. So for those of you who have traditionally water bathed your tomatoes, or if you're new to canning and taking this course so that you may learn, water bathing is completely suitable and safe for your tomatoes. Even if you have a variety of different tomatoes on hand and their pH ranges are all over the place, water bathing is still extremely safe, and it's something we've done for centuries now. With water bathing, however, just know that you're going to have to fully submerge the jars in water, and they're going to have to be at a full rolling boil, 40 minutes for pints, 45 minutes for quarts. Now, throughout this course, you're going to learn 2 different packing methods, hot packing and raw packing. You're also welcome to just preserve the tomatoes in their own juices. You don't have to necessarily add boiling water. So for those of you who, like me, don't want to peel your Romas and that's what you have a lot on hand, chop them up, get them in jars, and you still then process them for 40 minutes for pints, 45 minutes for quarts. If you wanted to save time and maximize your yield, that's where pressure canning comes in. And now they only need to process for 15 minutes in a pressure canner. You still have to take into account the 10-minute venting time and the 20-minute cool down time so that you can take the lid off your pressure canner. But the trade-off is you can double stack your pints in a pressure canner, and you can actually then double your yield, whereas you would have to do multiple batches in your water bather to accomplish the same thing. See how there's really no wrong way? Both of these methods are sound, and this processing is your preference. If you prefer to pressure can because you know you're getting the temperature higher in that pressure canner, go right ahead. They're interchangeable. I have oftentimes found ways to maximize the water bathing as well. We've used turkey fryers outside where we would have 4 turkey fryers going, a water bather on each one. And now I know that I can get 7 quarts in every water bather, and with 5 of them going, you do the math. Now, the other thing that you're going to hear about often, and I've given you some downloadable content in this module, so make sure you download that, is the lemon juice edition. And the reason that is done is because there are so many varieties. A tomato's pH typically ranges between 4.0 and 4.6. And to get it safe enough so that way we don't have to worry and we can water bathe it, individuals are recommended to add bottled lemon juice. You may do so, but if you don't, you're still not in harm's way. But for those of you who want to just get that acid up just a little bit more, you add 1 tablespoon of bottled lemon juice to every pint, 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice to every quart, and all it does is get that acidity up just a little bit higher, closer to 3.8, so that way you may just have that peace of mind. Now, I have heard from canners all around the world, and many have said they've never added lemon juice and never had a problem, and that's okay. Because with the 3 pillars of home canning, which are time, temperature, and acidic value, we are giving them proper exposure to the right amount of heat, which is 212 degrees Fahrenheit in a water bather and 240 plus degrees in a pressure canner. But let's focus on that for just a moment. We talked about the 40-45 minutes, and we talked about the 15 minutes, but depending on your elevation, that's going to be crucial for you to pay attention to. If you're like me, I'm in Michigan, I'm at 0 elevation where I reside, I can stick to those baseline times. If you live in a higher elevation, however, you may have to increase that time by 5 minutes depending on where you live. So now you're looking at 45 to 50 minutes depending on the size jar. If you're pressure canning, we're going to talk dial gauge for a moment. You want to be at 11 psi with the dial gauge. If you're in a higher elevation, however, you're going to be upwards of 15 psi. And for those of you that have a weighted gauge that does not have a dial, what you're going to then need to notate is 10 psi or 15 psi if you live in a higher elevation. The time, however, remains the same. What we're doing when we increase the psi is we're increasing the temperature. Notice the trade-off. That is why both of these methods are sound. We just have a longer time at 212 degrees and a shorter time when we're at 240 degrees or higher. So whatever suits you, if you're new to home canning and all you have on hand is a water bather, you may safely preserve tomatoes in that water bath. No worries. When you're ready to graduate to a pressure canner, just know that you're going to tweak a few things, but your yield will be higher and your processing time will be shorter. Okay, so before we dive into the rest of this module, just know that I have a lot of fun things in store. We're going to talk about 2 different recipes throughout this whole course, and I'm going to give you those blanching steps and techniques in a separate demo. So for those of you who've grown these big old beef steaks, don't worry. I'm going to give you the ways in which you can utilize them safely in canning.